Welcome to a place where empathy and communication flourish, and we delve into the building blocks of strong and loving relationships. The puppy glanced back and forth, observing the man and woman with indifference to his fate. He was the last one remaining from his litter. All his siblings had already found loving homes with humans. At first, this had been a daunting situation, but now he calmly watched the world around him, including the enticing aroma of food wafting by. "Ma'am, would you like this puppy?" "I only have one left," the mustachioed vendor called out to the potential buyer. "Is it a purebred?" she inquired skeptically while eyeing the puppy. "No, he's a mix, but he's quite robust. He's got some bloodhound traits and the intelligence of a German shepherd," the vendor advertised his product. "There are plenty of mixed-breed dogs wandering the streets, people give them away for free," the woman responded, her gaze still fixed on the adorable puppy. "Please, I beg you to reconsider, this one is special. His mother is a race winner, and his father is one of those breeds you mentioned. I can even show you the papers," the man said with a grin as he presented the documents. Interesting," the woman acknowledged. Mrs. Avery Thomas didn't have much money, certainly not enough to afford the purebred German shepherd she had always dreamed of owning. Even this mixed-breed pup would cost her a considerable amount. As she contemplated leaving, her eyes kept returning to the lonely puppy's adorable face, which oddly reminded her of herself. "Don't worry, he'll make a great companion and an even better watchdog than a purebred. Here, I'll give you this training manual for free," the vendor insisted. Mrs. Walker paused for a moment and realized that true happiness couldn't be bought with money. Besides, if nobody bought the puppy, the mustache seller would likely find a way to get rid of him, leaving him to fend for himself in a harsh world. "All right, I guess I'll take him," the woman finally smiled, deciding to give the puppy a chance at a better life. The puppy sensed an impending change, and fear crept into his eyes. He had already experienced loss when he and his siblings were separated from their mother. One by one, his brothers and sisters were adopted, leaving him alone. Now, the scariest part awaited as he was about to be taken away too. Overwhelmed by anxiety, he couldn't help but relieve himself on the cellar floor, where the mustachioed vendor laughed and handed him over to the woman. To his surprise, instead of rough hands, the puppy found himself in the gentle and warm embrace of the woman. Nestled against her chest, he felt a sense of comfort and contentment. By the time they reached her apartment, the puppy was already fast asleep. Thus began their enduring friendship. As Mrs. Walker opened the door, Jockey, now a medium-sized dog with intelligent eyes, bounded out, wagging his tail in a cheerful farewell. Mrs. Walker closed the door and checked her phone. Jockey would be back in an hour as part of his training to become more independent. Over the past few months, Jockey had learned to go for walks on his own due to Mrs. Walker's declining health. Her well-being had deteriorated to the point where she couldn't take Jockey for walks every day. Fortunately, everyone in the neighborhood knew Jockey, and there were no conflicts. Children adored playing with him, and he even let the youngest ones ride on his back, making him a beloved companion not just to Mrs. Walker but also to most of the other residents in the building. As Mrs. Walker slowly walked back to her room, she was reminded of her age, over 65 years, which brought with it unpleasant diagnoses and complications from existing conditions. Her heart condition was a primary concern, especially during inclement weather or when Jockey pulled her around the park. Moreover, her stepson, Owen, was causing trouble, making her life even more challenging. Ever since his father's passing, Owen had developed a deep-seated animosity towards his stepmother. He held her responsible for his father's death, although Avery had loved her husband dearly and had always cared for Owen, trying to fill the void left by his late mother. The reason behind Owen's hatred remained a mystery to Avery. Perhaps it was rooted in jealousy, but every attempt at forming a family was met with negativity, thwarting any chance of bonding. As time passed, Owen's anger intensified, especially when he drank, leading to furious outbursts about Avery living in what he considered his father's apartment. He wanted her out, but legally, the apartment belonged to both Avery and her husband, making her rightful owner. Despite his hostility, she could never bring herself to kick out her stepson. Avery noticed that Owen's hatred and rage had consumed him, preventing him from becoming a well-adjusted man. Loneliness engulfed him, and he surrounded himself with fellow alcoholics, perpetuating a vicious cycle of intoxication and instability. He rarely remained sober and struggled to find steady employment, relying on odd jobs to barely make ends meet. Instead of striving for change, he harbored resentment towards everyone and everything, shirking responsibility for his own actions and blaming external factors for his drinking. His drunken tirades often targeted Avery, accusing her of driving his father to an early grave when he drank alone at home. Despite the hurtful words and rude behavior, Avery endured Owen's antics, trying to soothe him, only to exacerbate the situation further. The stress and strain from these confrontations took a toll on Avery's health, leading to numerous emergency calls for her fragile heart. A brief respite came when Owen was caught for robbery and sent to prison, resulting in a 5-year sentence. However, due to good behavior, he was released after just 1 year. Upon his return, the fights resumed, and Avery's health deteriorated rapidly. The situation seemed dire, as Owen's resentment and alcohol-fueled rage continued to plague their lives, leaving Avery trapped in a challenging and heartbreaking predicament. Realizing that she could not continue living in such misery, Avery was determined to take action and find peace in her life. However, Owen seemed hell-bent on making her miserable and claiming the apartment for himself. Right from the start, Jockey had an instinctive dislike for Owen. Whenever Owen was drunk, he would hurl empty bottles at Jockey, prompting the dog to seek refuge in Avery's bedroom. Despite enduring abuse herself, Avery fiercely protected Jockey as if he were her own child. As Jockey grew into a larger dog, he started to stand up for himself, barking back at Owen. On one occasion, he even bit Owen, sending him into a fit of hysteria. Surprisingly, after that incident, Owen ceased targeting the dog, and their relationship devolved into an icy standoff. Jockey would growl at Owen, and Owen would retaliate with threats, but fortunately, things never escalated beyond words. The bond between Avery and Jockey was akin to that of a little girl and her devoted canine companion. Unable to have children due to medical reasons, Avery poured all her love and affection into her beloved pet, and Jockey reciprocated that love wholeheartedly. Jockey brought a new sense of life and joy into Avery's world, and the training manual she received proved to be invaluable. With dedication and patience, Avery diligently trained Jockey, who proved to be an intelligent, energetic, and quick learner. To him, training was not a chore but a delightful game that brought him happiness, evident in the ever-wagging tail that confirmed his contentment. As Avery was retired, she had ample free time, which she happily spent outdoors, away from the suffocating scent of alcohol in the apartment. In the first month, Jockey mastered simple commands like giving his paw and fetching a stick. As training progressed, Jockey's talents caught the attention of neighborhood children, who watched with curiosity as he learned new skills. Initially hesitant, the children grew more confident and began approaching Avery, asking to pet and interact with Jockey. Avery's initial concern was that Jockey might misinterpret the children's outstretched hands as a threat, but the ever-wagging tail reassured her of his friendly nature. Jockey quickly became the favorite dog in the neighborhood, and soon both parents and children enjoyed interacting with him. One day, as Avery prepared to go to the store, she noticed Jockey sleeping soundly and decided not to disturb him. Meanwhile, Owen snoozed in his room, likely due to another drunken episode. At least, Avery thought, he won't be bothering Jockey in that state. Despite the gloomy fall weather outside, Avery felt content. As she passed by people with sullen faces reflecting the dreary atmosphere, she wanted to smile at them all. The pharmacist, noticing her long list of prescriptions, smiled back and kindly asked if she was feeling all right. In the meantime, Owen woke up, disturbed by the noise around him. Suffering from a terrible hangover, he frantically searched for something to drink, preferably alcohol. Not finding any, he opened his eyes in frustration, his anger directed at everything and everyone, including the source of the noise that woke him, Jockey, whining as he tried to get out of the apartment. "Stupid dog," Owen muttered, tolerating the dog's antics for a while before reaching his boiling point. Though he didn't want to get up, the noise was too irritating to ignore, so he finally got out of bed. "I'm going to get you, you stupid dog," Owen threatened as he walked out. Noticing that Avery wasn't home, he wondered why she had left without her beloved dog. After standing there for a few minutes, an idea occurred to him. Owen had long harbored a desire to rid himself of the old woman he felt had poisoned his life with her presence. He had considered numerous options, but since she refused to leave the apartment voluntarily, claiming it was legally hers, he decided to target her health as a means of driving her away. If she ended up in the hospital, that was a satisfactory outcome for Owen. However, if she were to pass away, he saw it as an even better scenario. As far as he knew, Avery had no other family, which meant that he would become the legal heir to the apartment upon her demise. Owen knew how much Avery cherished Jockey, and he believed that if he could get rid of the dog, he could break her spirit and make her life even more miserable. Jockey had always growled at Owen whenever he approached the football, but now the dog's focus was on finding Avery. Owen hesitated, thinking that if he let Jockey out now, the dog might get lost. He approached the front door, momentarily forgetting their hostile relationship. The dog reminded him of their tension by turning and growling. "Calm down now, doggy. I want to let you out to your mama," Owen said, attempting to reassure Jockey. Jockey looked at Owen suspiciously but stopped growling. Owen noticed the intelligence in the dog's eyes as he cautiously took a step toward the door. Jockey kept a close watch on him, not turning away. Owen unlocked the door, and a blast of cold wind carried a familiar scent. Jockey happily bounded outside, and Owen whistled to himself as he returned to the kitchen to find a cure for his hangover. Despite his headache, he was in a good mood, just as Avery seemed to be. However, Avery's mood quickly plummeted when she realized that half of her pension would go toward paying for her medication. She needed that money to sustain her life and pay her bills. Since Owen had no income, Avery was left to fend for herself financially. As she stood there, lost in thought, the pharmacist interrupted her with a question. "I'm sorry, what were you saying?" Avery asked. The pharmacist pointed to the door with a smile and said, "Is that your dog trying to get in?" Avery turned and was surprised to see Jockey waiting at the door. "Jockey, what are you doing here?" Avery questioned, slightly puzzled. Then, turning back to the pharmacist, she explained, "Yes, that's my dog, Jockey. He was supposed to be asleep at home. Somehow, he must have followed my scent and found me here." Jockey, realizing that Avery had spotted him, stopped attempting to get inside and sat down, tilting his head to the side, as if to ask for forgiveness. One look from Jockey was all it took to make Avery smile and forget her troubles. She paid for her medicine and stepped outside to give her loyal companion a warm hug. Jockey wagged his tail joyously, sweeping the ground with his broom-like tail. Avery asked with curiosity, "How did you get out, boy?" In response, Jockey licked her face, and she was surprised at how cleverly he had tracked her. The route back home was winding, and she had come to this particular store due to the discounts offered to retirees. Avery had never taken Jockey here before, so it became apparent that he had followed her scent to find her. This realization sparked an idea in Avery's mind. She decided not to tell Owen about Jockey's newfound skill. However, when Owen saw the dog happily wagging his tail, his face revealed a sudden change, providing Avery with an insight into him. Determined to explore this opportunity, Avery decided to try training Jockey to run errands for her, especially to the store. Since Owen refused to assist her, Jockey became her only hope. Though she wasn't certain about the success of the endeavor, Avery was willing to make the effort. Despite being known as a quiet and not overly social old woman, her neighbors liked her. However, interactions among the building's residents were minimal, usually limited to a brief greeting. On the other hand, the children in the building adored Jockey and showered him with affection. Owen, however, was not well liked among the residents. Despite the crowd around her, Avery felt a sense of loneliness. As she instructed Jockey on how to open the door to the store, the pharmacist remained occupied with an elderly man counting his bills. The young pharmacist glanced over and recognized her regular customer, Avery, accompanied by her faithful dog, Jockey. The dog seemed unsure, looking back and forth between the door and Avery. Sensing his hesitation, Avery repeated her command, "Jockey, please come in." The pharmacist warmly welcomed Mrs. Walker and was intrigued by Avery's interaction with her pet. Avery explained her plan, "I'm training Jockey to come here for me. Would you mind if I train him to bring you my prescriptions? I'll pay online, and Jockey will pick them up." The pharmacist appeared uncertain, asking if Avery had any other options. It was a question she hadn't encountered before in her career. Avery expressed her lack of alternatives, and with some hesitation, the young woman agreed to help. She liked Jockey and wanted to assist the elderly woman. Over the following weeks, Avery devoted herself to training her loyal companion. Teaching Jockey to be independent proved challenging. She would let him out alone for an hour at a time, but he often returned quickly, missing Avery's presence and not comprehending her tough approach to training. The sound of Jockey's whining on one side of the door and Owen's cursing on the other was an unfortunate combination that Avery disliked. The next phase of training involved teaching Jockey the route to navigate safely around town and cross streets on his own. Surprisingly, this stage was quite easy, and Jockey quickly mastered it. However, the hardest part of the training lay ahead. Avery had to ensure that Jockey could perform all the tasks reliably upon her command. It took several attempts, but Jockey seemed to understand the importance of the task, persevering until he finally succeeded. A month later, Jockey was able to complete the course on his own, bringing a sense of relief to Avery. She now had a reliable way to have her prescriptions picked up, thanks to her clever and dedicated furry companion. The bond between Avery and Jockey grew even stronger as they tackled this challenge together, making their unique partnership even more special. One day, Avery woke up feeling terribly unwell. Her blood pressure was high, and her heart raced for no apparent reason. As she got out of bed, dizziness overwhelmed her, and her vision darkened. Concerned, Jockey lifted his head, as if asking if she was all right. "It's okay, Jockey. We'll get through this," Avery reassured him, even though all she wanted to do was collapse back onto the bed. When she glanced in the mirror, she saw a somber reflection staring back at her. Dark circles under her eyes, a puffy face, and heavy breathing reminded her of her frailty. Avery sighed, realizing she was growing older, and it made her feel melancholic. She approached the stand to take her medicine, only to discover it missing. Instead, there was a note with a list of items she needed to buy from the pharmacist. Feeling weak, she turned to Jockey and knew it was his time to shine. She didn't feel well at all. Avery called Jockey, and he came to her with a concerned gaze. She pinned the note to his collar and barely managed to make it to the door. Opening it, she looked at Jockey with a sense of tenderness and said, "God help you, Jockey." The dog seemed to look back at her questioningly, as if uncertain of the concept of God, or perhaps he just didn't want to leave her side. Avery glanced at Jockey as if it might be the last time she'd ever see him, and then she closed the door. Summoning all her strength, she made her way back to her bed, where she eventually lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Jockey navigated down the stairs and ventured outside. Children were playing near a puddle and noticed Jockey, assuming he had been let out to join their games. Excited, they ran towards him, hoping to include him. However, Jockey simply looked at them and moved on through the noisy crowd. He remembered the command imprinted on his mind and knew what awaited him at the end of his journey. He gracefully walked past people's feet on the sidewalk, most of whom recognized him and weren't afraid of his presence. Jockey skillfully navigated through the first set of traffic lights, with 3 more to conquer. Driven by instinct, he effortlessly avoided any dangerous obstacles along the way. As he neared the horizon, a familiar sign caught his attention, and he recognized the enticing scent emanating from the place. While he drooled at the prospect of food, there was something more important that drew him to this location, something that would make his owner, Avery, feel better. Finally, Jockey reached the door of the drugstore, scratching at it with his paw. However, unlike the times he had been here with Avery, there was now a sign on the door, which he curiously tilted his head to try and understand. Despite scratching the door several times, no one came out to him. The sign indicated that the store was closed, and Jockey waited patiently, occasionally scratching the door to attract attention. While waiting, he caught another scent similar to the one inside the drugstore, but weaker. It was a mixture of medicine and hot meat, coming from someone standing across the street. Jockey was torn between staying here or pursuing the person with the similar scent. Suddenly, the aroma of hot meat intensified, and he decided to follow the man. However, by the time he crossed the street, the man was already too far ahead. But Jockey was determined to find the source of the medicine-like scent. It reminded him of what came from the drugstore's door. The man he had chased turned out to be Henry Ward, a busy surgeon at the local hospital. On that particular day, he had numerous patients to attend to, as it seemed that people rushed to the hospital for even the slightest injuries in the small town. Although the injuries weren't severe, they kept Henry occupied. He found it surprising that so many people sought medical attention for minor ailments. However, little did he know that just across the street, a loyal dog named Jockey was patiently searching for something to help his owner, unaware that the drugstore he sought was closed for the day. Henry often found himself so exhausted that he lacked the energy even to eat his dinner. It was afternoon, and he stepped outside to get some fresh air, gazing at the gray sky and the bare trees as autumn slowly gave way to winter. However, he felt indifferent to the changing seasons. As he looked across the street, he noticed his assistant, Gavin, walking with a large dog that resembled a German shepherd but smaller in size. Playfully, Henry asked Gavin if he had made a new friend, laughing at the sight. Gavin, who had his headphones on, seemed taken aback when he took them off to hear Henry's question. He denied that the dog was his, and quickly entered the clinic. Meanwhile, Jockey, the dog, confidently approached the clinic's door, following the scent of medicine that led him there. When the door unexpectedly closed in front of him, he looked back and saw Henry, who he hadn't noticed before. Henry greeted him, asking, "Hey buddy, what's up?" In response, Jockey gave a short bark, seeming to communicate with the doctor. Henry introduced himself, leaning over to offer his hand, which Jockey surprisingly responded to by giving his paw, sealing their newfound friendship. Jockey then looked back at the door and then back at Henry, as if requesting to be let inside. With a smile, Henry explained, "Sorry buddy, I can't let you in. We have to keep the place sterile." During their interaction, Henry noticed something unusual on Jockey's collar. Upon closer inspection, he discovered a note wrapped in a plastic bag. Intrigued, he wondered what it could be. Petting the dog, Henry found Jockey to be amiable and approachable. Deciding to retrieve the note, he read it with curiosity. This is just a list of affordable medications," he mused. "Did your owner send you here?" Henry inquired as Jockey barked loudly and wagged her tail energetically. "I suppose she can't come to this drugstore herself," Henry thought aloud, "but you're in the wrong place, my friend. This is not a drugstore." Henry had chosen a career in medicine partly due to his own aspirations, but also to fulfill his father's wishes and carry on the family legacy. However, He soon realized the challenges and complexities of the medical system, leaving him somewhat disillusioned. Despite the difficulties, he remained a talented and caring surgeon, earning great respect as a specialist in the clinic and boosting its reputation. His ethical approach often clashed with the clinic's profit-oriented practices, and he found himself frequently arguing with management over less expensive treatment options for patients. Though Henry's dedication to altruism affected his personal life negatively, he still managed to have a home and a yearly vacation like everyone else. However, what set him apart was his conscience, a guiding force that influenced his actions. In the moment with Jockey, Henry's conscience took the lead. He examined the list of medications and realized the dog's owner must be financially challenged. Throughout his career, Henry had witnessed various fates, many of which were tragic. Nevertheless, his experiences did not turn him cynical. Instead, they reinforced his compassion for others. Upon scanning the list again, he noted that the dog's owner had a heart condition. It occurred to him that he could help. "Buddy, can you take me back to your owner?" "I could provide assistance," Henry proposed to Jockey, who perked up and wagged her tail in response. "Hold on a second," the dog seemed to convey, peering inside as if to ensure that everything was in order before leading Henry to her owner. His assistant, Gavin, waited as Henry quickly informed him that he would be out for a while, shutting the door before any further conversation. With limited funds in hand, Henry managed to purchase all the medicines listed on the note, along with other more effective but expensive pills. Securing the bag to Jockey's collar, he imagined it would be safely delivered to the owner. As soon as Henry secured the bag, Jockey began jogging down the sidewalk, and Henry followed closely behind. He marveled at the dog's extraordinary intelligence, which made him appear more civilized in the city than some people. After walking for about an hour, Jockey led Henry to a nondescript apartment building a few miles from the clinic. "Wow, you've brought me quite a distance to see your owner," Henry remarked to Jockey. The dog stopped in front of an entrance, looking at Henry as if to instruct him to open the door. Just then, a boy ran up and greeted Jockey, eyeing Henry suspiciously before returning to the sandbox. Realizing that the dog's name was Jockey, Henry asked him to show the way. Jockey ran up the stairs and started scratching at a door. Henry decided to try the doorbell, but it appeared to be broken, so he resorted to knocking repeatedly. However, no one answered the door, leaving Henry to ponder if he had been too gruff in his attempts. A husky male voice from inside responded, and Jockey growled in displeasure, revealing his occasional anger. The door finally opened, revealing an extremely unpleasant and much younger man, whose face bore the effects of constant drinking, making him appear older than he actually was. The sight was disheartening for Henry, who had a strong sense that this young man might be the owner of the medicine-seeking dog. From the disheveled hair, it was evident that the young man had just woken up. His unkempt clothes emitted an unpleasant smell, giving Henry a clear picture of the guy's disregard for cleanliness. The smell of alcohol on his breath added another layer to the unfortunate sight. "What do you want?" the man barked without offering any greeting. Henry maintained a polite yet firm demeanor. "Hello, for starters. I'm a doctor, here to see the patient," he replied, setting boundaries with the difficult individual. "I didn't call anyone." "You got the wrong door," the man retorted, refusing to let Henry in. However, Henry explained that it was a woman who had called him a few days ago. He realized that Owen, the man in front of him, was likely the alcoholic son of the woman who needed medical assistance. Owen dismissed Henry's explanation and threatened to call the police. Henry braced himself for a potentially long argument or even a confrontation, but Jockey, the dog, intervened, growling at Owen. Startled, Owen stumbled back into the apartment, and Jockey followed him inside, providing Henry with an opportunity to handle the situation. He asked Owen about the woman's whereabouts, and Owen merely turned and walked into one of the rooms. Jockey went into another room, and Henry followed suit. Upon looking around, Henry noticed the dismal living conditions, dust and empty bottles everywhere, signs of abject poverty. The walls appeared untouched for decades, with faded and discolored wallpaper. The thick layer of dust confirmed that the occupants couldn't keep the place clean. The situation made Henry understand why Owen had reacted defensively at first. The scene painted a stark picture of the woman's living conditions and the challenges she and her son faced. It was evident that they needed help beyond just medical attention. As a doctor with a compassionate conscience, Henry felt determined to make a difference and provide assistance to this struggling family. Henry knocked on their door and, upon receiving permission, entered their home. This room appeared tidier than the rest of the apartment, but the air was stale. Greeting the weak woman, Henry introduced himself as a doctor who had met Jockey by chance and trained him to fetch medicine, though he had never thought of inviting other doctors. Avery struggled to keep Jockey from whining and licking her face, clearly proud of her dog's achievement. "I'm Henry Ward," he said, "and I'm a doctor. Jockey and I met by chance. I trained him to fetch me medicine, but I never thought to invite doctors." Avery smiled, affectionately patting Jockey, who reveled in the attention. "I'm Avery, just doing what most retired people do, being sick," she replied with a weak voice, visibly unwell. Although Henry wasn't a cardiologist, her appearance suggested that she needed hospitalization. As Avery opened the medicine box with a worried expression, Henry reassured her, "It's all right, Mrs. Walker. This is on me, ma'am. You don't have to pay. Let me know what's wrong." Avery seemed relieved by his generosity, but Henry's discomfort grew as she regarded him with admiration. He quickly focused on her condition, realizing that he had arrived just in time. As Avery shared her long and difficult story, Henry couldn't help but empathize with her. Though he wasn't a specialist in her medical needs, he sensed the seriousness of her situation. As she finished recounting her tale, Avery leaned back on her pillow. Henry had a question on his mind: "Why didn't you go to the hospital?" In response, Avery silently rolled her eyes and pointed towards the noise in the apartment, indicating that her son, Owen, was the reason she couldn't seek medical attention. It became clear that her living situation and the presence of her alcoholic son made it difficult for her to access the care she desperately needed. Despite the alcoholic sounds coming from the other room, Henry kept his composure and focused on helping Avery. He assured her they would tackle one problem at a time and promised to arrange a visit to the cardiologist. Henry dialed a colleague, Leo, who was known for creating problems, but also respected fairness and honesty. After explaining Avery's situation, Leo agreed to admit her to the hospital. With the arrangements made, Henry offered to take care of Jockey while Avery was in the hospital. Avery looked worried about leaving her beloved dog, but Henry reassured her that he would take good care of Jockey and even enjoy spending time with him in the park. As they prepared to leave the apartment, Owen, the stepson, emerged from his room, looking happier than before. Curious about their departure, he asked where they were going. Avery, surprisingly composed, told him they were going to the hospital, to which Owen expressed concerns about their financial situation. But Avery remained positive, saying everything would be fine, and they left with Henry's assistance. As they headed to the hospital, Avery expressed her gratitude, considering Henry an angel sent to her rescue. Henry modestly dismissed the notion, emphasizing that he was just doing his job as a doctor. They arrived at the hospital, and with Henry's intervention, Avery was admitted for treatment. Back at the apartment, Owen's mood seemed to have changed, possibly due to alcohol or other factors. He had found some form of temporary happiness but remained unaware of the situation's gravity. As the events unfolded, Henry's heart was filled with a mix of emotions. He was determined to help Avery and Jockey, hoping that his actions would make a positive impact on their lives. Little did he know that his intervention would lead to a series of unexpected events that would bring about a transformation in the lives of everyone involved. Owen's malicious accusations and disrespectful behavior enraged Henry, but he managed to control his anger in front of Avery. However, Owen's last hurtful comment unleashed a surge of anger that Henry struggled to contain. He sternly ordered Owen to go to his room before he lost his temper completely, warning him about his disdain for alcoholics. As Owen retreated to his room, the taxi driver informed them that he couldn't allow Jockey in his car due to concerns about his vehicle. Henry proposed that he would take Jockey for a walk while Avery went to the clinic. Avery agreed, and Henry assured her he would visit her later, after she got checked out by Palmer, the cardiologist. Henry and Jockey embarked on a walk, strolling through the evening streets. They reached Henry's home, both feeling a sense of accomplishment for the day's efforts. After a quick meal, they retired to bed. Jockey was content lying at Henry's feet, knowing his owner was satisfied with their work. In the following days, Henry continued to visit Avery in the hospital, supporting her through her treatment and recovery. Jockey became a frequent companion during these visits, bringing joy to both Avery and the other patients. Henry's dedication to Avery's health and well-being went beyond the call of duty, making him a true friend and confidant to the elderly woman. As time passed, Henry's relationship with Jockey grew stronger, and the loyal dog became an integral part of Henry's life. Jockey's remarkable intelligence and unwavering loyalty warmed Henry's heart, and the two formed a unique bond. Through the ups and downs of life, they faced challenges together, each bringing out the best in the other. As for Owen, his anger and resentment gradually faded as he saw the genuine care and support Henry provided to Avery and Jockey. Slowly but surely, he began to recognize his own mistakes and the impact of his actions on others. With time and the support of those around him, Owen embarked on a journey of personal growth and redemption. In the end, the intertwined lives of Avery, Henry, Jockey, and even Owen took an unexpected turn, transforming each of them in ways they never thought possible. Their story became a testament to the power of compassion, friendship, and the healing bond between humans and animals. Henry's compassionate actions didn't escape the notice of his boss, who used it as a reason to withhold his monthly bonus and deliver a lecture on workplace discipline. However, Henry took it all in stride, knowing that his decision to save a life was worth more than any monetary reward. On the other hand, the chief physician's ongoing struggles with alcohol led to various incidents, and he even lost his driver's license. Despite this, Henry remained unfazed, which only fueled the head doctor's irritation. As Henry stepped into the hallway, he encountered Leo Palmer, who acknowledged the impact of his good deeds. Leo showed Henry Avery's medical card, detailing the severe complications she faced and how crucial Henry's intervention had been. It was evident that Henry's timely action had saved Avery's life, filling him with a sense of pride and contentment. Determined to help Avery further, Henry inquired about the total cost of her treatment. Knowing that she had no one else to rely on, he decided to take responsibility for her expenses. Meanwhile, Jockey, perched on the second floor, gazed lovingly at his owner, as if recognizing the profound impact of Henry's kindness on her well-being. Henry's benevolence not only saved Avery's life but also made a lasting impression on those around him. As he continued to extend his compassion and expertise to those in need, he became a symbol of hope and goodness within the medical community. And in return, his bond with Jockey grew stronger, serving as a constant reminder of the profound connection between humans and their loyal animal companions. A week had passed since Avery had last seen Henry when he helped her get into the cab. Cardiologist Leo, who had been taking care of her, wondered if she was related to Henry in some way. However, Avery had no family left. Her parents had passed away when she was young, and any distant relatives had long forgotten about her existence, consumed by their own troubles. In the hospital ward, conversations revolved around everyone's ailments, and Avery felt a sense of isolation. However, she found solace in the visits from Jockey, who came every day to sit outside her window or follow her commands. Jockey's intelligence and antics brought joy not only to her but to other patients as well. At around 5 in the afternoon, Jockey would leave, looking back guiltily, likely because it was Henry's time to finish his shift and go home. Finally, after a week, Henry came to visit Avery. Her health was gradually improving, and she spent her days reminiscing about her past life through old photos she had with her. Each photo held a special story, making them more valuable to her than any book. When Henry greeted her, Avery couldn't help but call him her guardian angel. He brought her a bag of candy and asked how she was feeling. He joked about whether she felt young and beautiful again, and Avery couldn't help but smile. She mentioned that her stepson hadn't bothered to visit, assuming he was waiting for her to pass away. As they talked, Henry noticed the photo album. Avery was initially hesitant, but he gently encouraged her to share the stories behind the photos. It was something deeply personal to her, and she had never discussed these stories, not even with her late husband. However, she found herself opening up to Henry, feeling a sense of trust and comfort in his presence. Henry's interest surprised Avery, and she hesitated before sharing one of the photos with him. As she flipped through the album, one particular picture caught Henry's attention, and he frowned. He couldn't help but point to that photo, even though it seemed to evoke a painful memory for Avery. Seeing her pale expression, Henry reassured her that she didn't have to talk about it if she didn't want to. However, Avery decided to open up and share the story of the picture. Avery began by describing herself as a first-year medical student, deeply immersed in her studies and committed to her profession. She was determined to excel in her studies, and socializing and dating were not on her agenda. However, everything changed when she met Rogers during her internship. He was a fellow geek, studying to become a therapist. As they spent more time together, their friendship blossomed into something more, and they started dating. Discussions about medical cases gradually turned into love poems and stargazing on the dorm roof. Eventually, Rogers confessed his feelings for Avery at the prom, and she realized she couldn't live without him. Their love seemed to be the most important thing to the couple, and Rogers introduced Avery to his parents. Unfortunately, Rogers' mother, Mrs. Ross, didn't approve of Avery, and they couldn't understand why. Avery paused for a moment, reliving the memories, and continued with the story, sharing the challenges and conflicts that arose due to Mrs. Ross's disapproval. Despite the hurdles, Avery and Rogers remained devoted to each other, facing the trials together. As the story unfolded, Henry listened attentively, understanding the depth of emotions behind each word. He could sense the significance of this story to Avery and felt honored that she had chosen to confide in him. The bond between them grew stronger, as both shared their own experiences and vulnerabilities. Throughout the conversation, Avery felt a sense of catharsis, as if finally releasing the weight of this story that she had kept to herself for so long. And as she finished sharing the tale, she smiled, grateful for the opportunity to open up to someone who had shown her genuine care and empathy. Roger's parents, especially his mother Mrs. Ross, didn't initially approve of Avery as a match for their son. They constantly argued about it, and Mrs. Ross was vocal in her criticism of Avery. However, their relationship took an unexpected turn when Avery fell sick during class and discovered she was pregnant. Avery was frightened and unsure of how to break the news to Rogers. She had always wanted to experience the joy of a happy family, but the prospect of being a mother brought on anxiety. On the other hand, Rogers was overjoyed when he learned about the pregnancy. He didn't concern himself with the challenges they might face, he simply embraced the idea of becoming a father. When Rogers informed his parents about the pregnancy, there was initially an uproar, but surprisingly, Mrs. Ross had a change of heart. She became extremely supportive and caring towards Avery, going above and beyond to assist her in every way possible. Mrs. Ross made sure Avery received the best medical care, arranged appointments with top gynecologists, and personally accompanied her to the maternity hospital. During the delivery, Avery lost consciousness. When she woke up, she found herself in a different ward, connected to an IV drip. The weight in her belly was gone, and she realized she wasn't pregnant anymore. She tried to move but couldn't. A passing nurse noticed she was awake and offered reassurance and comfort. As Avery processed what had happened, she was filled with both gratitude and confusion. She wondered why Mrs. Ross had suddenly become so caring and dedicated to her well-being. The mystery of the events surrounding her delivery left her with a mix of emotions, but she couldn't deny the genuine concern Mrs. Ross had shown. In the days that followed, Avery's relationship with Roger's family changed dramatically. Mrs. Ross continued to support her, becoming a devoted grandmother to their child. The initial disapproval and conflicts had given way to a newfound bond, and Avery couldn't help but feel a mixture of appreciation and curiosity about the woman who had once criticized her so harshly. Despite the unexpected turn of events, Avery felt blessed to have her baby and the support of her partner and his family. The journey of motherhood had just begun, and with the newfound ally in Mrs. Ross, she looked forward to experiencing the joy and challenges of raising a child together. Avery woke up to find Mrs. Ross sitting by her side. Seeing the familiar face, Avery couldn't help but burst into tears. But Mrs. Ross appeared cold and pale, as if burdened by something terrible. She gazed at Avery for a long moment before delivering the devastating news, "Avery, the baby didn't make it. I warned you from the beginning that you and Rogers were not a suitable match. Look at where it led us. You were in a coma for several months, and they couldn't save the baby. He was stillborn. I think you and Rogers should go your separate ways. He's not coping well because of what happened. He doesn't even want to see you. We covered all the medical expenses for you, but you have to leave my son alone. You'll find someone else, believe me. I'm sorry, Avery. This is for the best. Goodbye." Mrs. Ross departed, and Avery never saw her again. After her recovery, Avery embarked on a journey of self-discovery, traveling far and wide in search of her place in the world. Despite her wanderings, she eventually returned to her hometown. There, she found love and married a widower named Paul, who was raising a child. Paul proved to be a loving and honorable husband, nothing like his father, Owen. Avery reassured her listener, Mr. Davis, that Paul was a kind and genuine person, worthy of trust and love. As they shared their life stories, Henry revealed a surprising connection between them. His own mother had died during childbirth, and he was raised by his grandmother, Mrs. Ross. His father had been kept away, and Henry was left to grow up with his grandmother's care. Upon hearing this, Avery and Henry contemplated the possibility of doing a DNA test to explore any potential connections between them. The idea was intriguing, as their stories had several striking similarities. The thought of uncovering any hidden links between them left them both with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the conversation continued, Avery and Henry felt a growing sense of empathy for each other. They had both endured tragic losses, and the idea of a possible familial connection offered a glimmer of hope. The prospect of discovering the truth about their pasts became an enticing possibility, one that held the potential to heal old wounds and forge new bonds. Henry couldn't help but grin at the improbable coincidence, but he was determined to pay for the DNA tests regardless. Avery responded calmly, saying she didn't mind at all. They shifted the conversation to lighter topics, discussing Jockey's silly antics and successful execution of the commands Henry had taught him, along with other details that kept them engaged in conversation. Eventually, they bid each other farewell, and Henry headed home. On his way back, he stopped at a grocery store, buying dinner supplies and a bottle of whiskey. That night, he experienced his first drunkenness, contemplating the shocking revelation he had seen in the patient's picture at the hospital. The man was none other than Rogers Davis, his father. Surprisingly, the initial DNA test yielded a negative result, which was not uncommon. Determined to uncover the truth, Henry ordered 3 more tests from different companies. One test came back positive, leaving him with 2 envelopes that held the fate of 2 people. For a long time, he hesitated to open the envelopes, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. The doctor feared both possible outcomes, each carrying significant implications for multiple lives. Finally, he mustered the courage to open the envelopes. The results indicated a positive match. Avery was his mother. Overwhelmed with emotions, Henry contacted his father, Dave, and shared the news. The revelation brought shock and disbelief, but also a sense of joy at the prospect of being reunited after 40 years of separation. Henry narrated how the dog named Jockey played a role in connecting lost souls and reuniting their family. Despite the long years apart, Avery and Rogers quickly found comfort in each other's arms, as if they had never been apart. The Davis family was whole once again, father, mother, and son, united and happy despite the bitterness of their years apart. Avery recovered quickly, and soon Henry decided to reveal the truth to her. She met Rogers, and there were tears and hugs as they rekindled their lost love, as though no time had passed at all. Since then, their favorite pastime has been strolling in the park, with their route guided by the ever-faithful Jockey. Meanwhile, Owen's life took a darker turn. Though he initially got what he wanted when Avery moved in with her husband, it didn't take long for him to revert to his old ways. He was caught in the act of robbery and eventually ended up in jail. Despite the trials they faced, the Davis family found redemption and happiness, finally together after years of longing. The reunion brought them the joy they had always yearned for, thanks to a twist of fate and the loyalty of a dog named Jockey. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story.